Hello, community. So this time around, I want to talk about a research that was commissioned by video game social network Pixwoo.com. And basically, the point of their survey was that typically, when people think of video gamers, they typically think of a teenage boy who holds himself up in his room all day, and that's all he does is play video games, and he just leaves to get something to drink, something to eat, use the bathroom, and that's all he does. And this survey basically went out and got 2,000 self-identified gamers in Britain, and they took the survey, and the survey found that this was actually not the case, that the average video gamer is 35 years old, which makes sense to me because I think the 90s was really when video games took hold. That the 80s, a lot of the 80s, a lot of people I knew who's like my age who video games, whether it was people who told them this or they thought this, that video games was a fad, and that it's just for kids, and that once you grow out of it, that it's a kid's game and you shouldn't play it anymore. And that to this day, they consider it just a kid thing. And so it didn't take a strong hold for a lot of people in the 80s, whereas in the 90s, video gaming really became a thing, really became, solidified itself. So 35 makes a lot of sense. It also makes a lot of sense that they'd have one child, an average, that they would on average, be in a relationship or be married, and that they would on average make 23,000 British pounds a year, which averages out to about 34,000 US dollars. Now again, based on the current currency, dollar versus the euro and all the other stuff, the British pound, that bases on how much, obviously, what that really is based on every country. So, and a lot of that makes sense where they are in their life. It makes sense. They have more money, for gaming and other hobbies. But one of the most interesting things of this hobby was basically it broke it down and said basically that on average, these people that they sit in front of their console and play till 10:58 at night playing video games. And I'd like to disprove this number, but the truth is I end up spending up at least till midnight every night playing video games. So that number I can't disprove. And that basically they spend roughly 2.5 hours a day, 5 days a week playing video games, which on average, roughly averages out to more than 12.5 hours a week. They typically own 2 different consoles, 18 games, and take just over 4 weeks to complete each game. So, more than one console makes sense. Nobody owns one video game console anymore. No one's loyal to just one console anymore, I think, so that number makes sense. And one of the most interesting things when it comes to this hobby is the relationship aspect, because in this survey it says that more than 1 in 20 of those in relationships say gaming is a frequent cause of arguments, while 50% of gamers have broken up with someone over their pastime. It also basically said that most gamers end up getting in some kind of argument with their partners twice a week over video gaming. And all that makes sense. And it's not that necessarily the hobby is always the problem, but it makes sense because, listen, when you're in a relationship with somebody else, and they know you like your hobby, and they want you to enjoy your hobby, they really do, but at the same time, when they see you're not getting things done that they think you should get done, or ignoring things they think are important, that's going to lead to arguments. And one of the hardest things about our hobby is balancing your personal life and gaming, balancing your family life and gaming. It's always a balancing act. So there's always going to be some kind of, every so often, going to be some kind of argument or, tension over gaming. Again, the breaking up number wasn't as high, and I didn't think it would be. Of course, in this survey, they never explained how often they actually play games with their family members. But anyway, and here is a number that doesn't surprise me, that more than 3/4 say they would never stop loving video games. They also said that typically they end up spending 4 hours in line waiting for a new game at a mid-store opening once a year, which I never do, but I understand if you really like that game that you're willing to stay in line for, or that console for that matter. You're willing to stay in line for that console launch, especially if you're excited for it. And that basically it also said that that average video game players have 5 online friends in the gaming community, and nearly 30% said they met up with an online gamer friend in person. And those numbers seem about right. I mean, I average online games with people from the community fluctuates from 3 to 5, so that number obviously, and that bases on how many people know, right? That number could go higher and lower just based on if a couple people in that survey were to know a lot of people. But again, it was an interesting survey showing that basically, young people aren't the core of gaming, that it is more closer to the middle-aged, more closer to the established currently that are kings to gaming, and that's why you've seen more of the mature thing. But anyway, what do you think of the survey? Do you agree with the fact that the average gamer is 35 years old? Do you agree with these numbers? Do you disagree? We'd love to hear your guys' comments. And I will see you guys soon for another video. It's something that I find interesting to talk about.